Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of our series. In the second episode, we will be diving into signs of burnout, my own personal experiences, and some coping mechanisms.
All right. So there was another thing I was thinking about with the whole being accessible 24/7 is a new problem that have occurred is that we now work with people from all over the world, and people are in different time zones, which also sometimes ends up in really interesting situation when it comes to time. Like all of a sudden you're about to go to bed and you get a message from from a model that you're planning on working with, and it's not 1:00 in the morning for her. It's 7:00 in the evening because she's in Manila or wherever, and then you feel obliged to answer that because for her you should be accessible now, but you're about to go to bed.
Exactly.
Like I'm having that situation at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard, right?
Yeah, and like also the world has shrunk so much so that also the things we work with, like the dresses that arrive, like you have things coming in from all over the world because all of a sudden you find a designer that you like. Oh yeah, great, but they're based in Seattle. So, and they want to work with you. They want to send you some stuff. Okay, so when is that stuff going to show up? Like we're sending stuff all over the world, and it's a pressure as well because in some cases, those things need to come back. They need to go back to the designer as well. So there's so many things that mess us up from a stress point of view.
I mean, now that you're mentioning it, there are so many like minor details that just add up, at the end of the day. It's running to the post office, it's like running to scout for the location, it's double checking the lighting, renting out the equipment. It's just so many small things. And you're like, it's just renting equipment, it's not a big deal. It's just like sending back a dress, it's not a big deal. It's just answering a message at 11 o'clock at night, it's not a big deal. But at the end of the day, you wake up one day and you're just exhausted.
Yeah, because all those things add up.
They do.
Every little thing steals a little bit of energy and it steals a little bit of time. And then all of a sudden you realize the amount of time that you've lost is actually huge. And the amount of effort you've put into all those little things tend to be a lot bigger than you thought they were.
I will also say, and I keep bringing this up because if you've lived in a couple of different places, the culture also has an impact in how you view things. And I keep bringing culture into the discussions because it's so important in my opinion. When you go to Greece, for example, or when you're in the US, and I've lived in both of these countries, like that talk is not happening the same way it's happening in Sweden. Like in Greece, you are expected to be available 24/7. You're also expected to answer immediately. Otherwise, you're not a part of the momentum of what's happening culturally. The same goes for the US. Like, there's not a lot of people that will turn around in the US and say, I'm not working on the weekends.
No, of course. I mean, and it is a culture. But then, as a stark contrast to that, we are now based in Sweden, both of us, where something that is placed very high on the value is work-life balance.
Exactly.
But it also usually creates a conflict between you and
the world.
And the world. Because they don't understand this culture.
No.
And they go, what do you mean don't work on weekends?
What do you mean you're going to take a month off?
Yeah.
Like in Greece or in the US, I don't think I've met someone who said, I just took a whole month off. Like, how do you even go back to work after that? Some people have asked me that, like, how do you return back? Like, what do you mean, how do you return back? You just took a break.
Yeah, but the thing is, it works because everybody else also took a month off. So,
here it works, yes.
Nothing happened. But that can be a stressor as well. Because then when you're working here and you want to do you end up in a situation where you need to do a larger shoot during what is generally considered vacation month. Nothing's working. Nobody's working.
Yeah, here, like, July is off.
Yeah. Like, good luck trying to rent equipment in July.
I mean, anything, not just equipment. Like, if you need a doctor, you might not find someone. Like, they might be understaffed.
Yeah, and people that are not from here have a very hard time having an understanding for that.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you end up doing a lot more.
Yeah.
Simply because there's actually nobody else to do it.
There was a lot of things I feel like I relearned when I came here.
What would those be? Like,
I would say like nobody has ever taught me that you need to be able to take big breaks to actually just restart the brain, or that when you say after 5 I'm done, like you're done. Like those were not like concepts that you're being taught in cultures such as in Greece where I grew up. And it made me realize how tired I have been most of my life. And the side effects of that is showing up today because I have lived my life like that. And I think if I had a better foundation from the start, I would actually be able to manage my stress and work-life balance a bit better today.
yeah, and it is a learned behavior when you look at it from that angle for you. For me, it is a cultural thing. Like, we take our breaks because we're also legally mandated to. Like, it is the law.
Yeah, like I remember we had a conversation. I called you, like I went to the reception of like a health center. And I'm like, nobody's here. There, you're like, yeah, it's 12 o'clock. Like it's lunchtime. And I was like, what do you mean it's lunchtime? Like people should be here always. Like they can just have someone in the back, but it kind of teaches you that work is not the only thing that is important. And that is a very core thing to learn in life. So you don't end up in situations where you prioritize work above other things, and most importantly, above yourself and your well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is also, but then you kind of, you go full circle back to working with what you love, because you also personally make it a priority.
Yes.
Because it is what you love to do.
Exactly.
So sometimes, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be editing until 3 in the morning, but you get into that flow state and all of a sudden it is 3 in the morning because it is what you love to do. And it's hard to hold yourself back at that point because it is an enjoyment at that point.
It definitely is.
Because you have that creative flow and you're working on the things that you love and the images that you made and all the work that came before it, all the groundwork we talked about is coming up and it's kind of blossoming almost when you're finally getting to finalize those images. So it's hard at that point to give yourself that break to step away and think like, okay, I've been editing for 6 hours, maybe I need a break. Like, how do you have a way to step away at that point and think, okay, maybe now is a good time to take a break, even though you maybe don't want to?
I think a key indicator is, especially when it comes, for example, to editing or shooting, is that I start noticing that I'm doing things not out of creativity. I'm doing things out of like a factory production. Like it's the same like editing like the previous photo. It's the same thing as before. I'm trying to get the shoot done. Then I'm realizing that it's not creativity that is taking the wheel. It's actually just trying to be productive, and it removes the enjoyment and creativity out of the process. In order for you to be creative and deliver something like outstanding, in my opinion, you need to have enough of a buffer, energy-wise. I have seen many times that I am in a set, I end up being exhausted because there's been a very difficult like pre-planning phase. And I end up on the day, I'm still excited, I'm still happy, but the lack of energy will make me not be able to think creatively and to come up with something that would make my photo exceptional.
Do you think this is something that a lot of photographers actually miss? That in order to be creative in your work, you require an energy buffer. Like creativity does not function well when you are running on bare minimum. You need to have a surplus of
creativity
energy.
is a very interesting thing for human beings because it ties to imagination. It also ties to flexibility, like mental flexibility. And if you're tired and drained, just naturally, your mind and your nervous system is not working on that, like machine tempo. It's more of like saving energy rather than spending it. And when you are already at that phase, you are already too deep in. You need to take a step back and you need to rest. And usually when that happens, when I get that flag, for me, I have realized that I'm already too late in the game. I have already tired myself so much that now I need a few days, weeks sometimes, to even recuperate and get back to that healthy creative state.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's interesting because I think if you're not within the creative field, you just look at creative people as creative.
Yeah.
It's like somebody who is fast at running, they're always fast at running. But there is not preparation, I would say, but more like circumstance that will allow you to be more or less productive or
Creating the
creative.
environment,
Yeah.
right? For you to blossom that creativity.
Exactly. And very often, the best way to get creative, from my opinion, is to be bored.
Well, many people can say that maybe meditating can be boring, but like one research has shown that meditation, for example, being in that very relaxed, empty-minded space regularly actually increases creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you're doing is intentionally or unintentionally giving yourself a buffer.
Yeah.
Because you're removing distractions, you're removing things that will consume your energy, and you're building a buffer through doing that.
And I don't know if this is the same for other people, but for me, like, I have realized that when I am in a creative state of mind, I disconnect so much from my physical reality. I forget to eat. I forget to drink water. Like, if that happens on set, you will see me maybe work even 10 hours straight, and I will not realize that I haven't even snacked on a cookie or something.
No, but that's why when I have assisted you, half of my assistant's bag is cookies.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you taught me so many things about these things because for me, it's like I'm just in this flow and I don't reconnect with what's happening in reality, and then it hits me when it's too late.
Yeah, and then the recuperation time for that is not reasonable.
Yeah, it's
like
longer.
it's not a cookie anymore. Like you need actual time.
Yes.
And when you get to that point, there are either you say, okay, so we're going to wrap up for the day, if that's a possibility, or do you have certain methods that you use that can maybe give you like a quicker turnaround?
Well, I would say try to be connected with what's happening in the physical world. When we get like in our creativity, as I said, you disconnect from what's happening physically. You might not realize that your eyes are getting tired when you're editing. You might not realize that you haven't moved from your chair for like 3 hours straight. So trying to be as present as you can in the meantime is important, and also not overpacking your schedule with things that need to be done. Because I have a to-do list and I always say like this needs to be completely edited and finished in like 2 days. And sometimes that's not a realistic goal. I set way too high up the bar for what needs to be accomplished in what time frame as well. So it's like I'm learning now to just space things out as much as possible.
It's an interesting reflection on packing your schedule, because I think that also a little bit speaks to what people, some like today, if you're talking about social media, you talk about hustle culture.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, and you need to be constantly, you need to hustle always, constantly, and working if you want to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has a very, very negative impact on especially the creative field, but in general, because you come to a limit where you can't work anymore. But if they are not successful at what they do, still feel like the only way to get more successful is to work more.
To work really hard, to never give up, to never give yourself a break, to do also a very like negative self-talk that we have normalized, that come on, you can do better, like I know you can do better than this, don't give up. And the thing is, like, it's a normal part of the process to give up and to take breaks, and sometimes breaks might mean shifting things around in such a way that it might even hurt your career temporarily.
Yeah, because sometimes you gotta take a step back and try to kind of realize that sometimes you also end up in a situation where you realize that where you're steering your career isn't actually where you kind of want to go. Mm-hmm. Because you've been so busy pushing forward that you didn't actually pay attention to which direction you were pushing.
And on that, actually, I'm also thinking like sometimes maybe you think you know where you're going. Like, let's say that I had a list when I was in the beginning of my career with the top 3 magazines that I wanted to be published in. And it was for me like this huge milestone in my head that if I was to achieve that, I was going to be very happy and feel very content as a photographer and as a professional. I would feel that I had gained value in myself and my work. And I don't know if it was manifestation, I don't know if it was hard work, whatever it was, I managed to get those 3 things that I listed, but I wasn't happy after that.
What did you feel after that?
I felt unhappy. And the reason was not because I got published. I was unhappy with the tempo that I had to be working in order to get these things that I wanted. I was actually sacrificing my well-being for quite some time, especially at that time I was in the US, and I was working extremely hard on my dream and making this thing work, that I destroyed my health, both my physical health and my mental health. And when I got actually that accomplishment, I was sitting there and thinking like, yeah, it's amazing, it still makes me so happy, like seeing that magazine with my prints in it. But at what cost?
Yeah, and that's an interesting reflection, because it speaks to what's the cost of your goals. Like,
yeah.
If you reach your goals and you can't enjoy it, was it worth it?
Yeah, or maybe let's say you enjoy it in the moment, but like, what are you really like prioritizing in life? And some people might say that have the same dreams and haven't accomplished them yet. They might say like, oh, are you serious? Like, that wasn't like good enough for you to be content and happy. And the thing is like, you can have the thing you always dreamed of, but if you are, let's say, 10 kilos less than what you're supposed to be, and you're losing hair because of stress, and suddenly your resting heartbeat is 130 and 140 beats per minute, maybe that's actually not the best thing to achieve, because that was the cost.
Yeah, because if that's what you're giving up to get that magazine cover, like, you also got to put into perspective how many more magazine covers do you think you'll be able to accomplish if that's what it cost?
Yeah.
Then that's going to be the one you got, and that's going to be it. And the reason why we decided to pick up this subject from the beginning of this podcast and why we decided on this was because you also have personal experience with burnout. As most of the people that are viewing or listening probably can tell from now, is that you know this from personal experience, what it feels like. When you were starting to hit that sort of line where burnout was imminent, what kind of things manifested for you? Like, how were you feeling and what was happening? What are the things that people should look out for before they step over that line?
Well, the thing is, like, I caught it way too late the first time. And the first time when it happened, I was in the US and I was, as I said, chasing this thing, chasing my dreams and accomplishing the things I wanted. And I was like, there must be a way for me to balance things out. I'm stressed, but maybe I can find a way. And the truth is, in that tempo and the way I had built my business and the way I was working, there was no way of shifting things around for me at that time. So I decided to take a 2-year break to first recover my physical health. It took me literally 2 years to touch the camera because I was unable to find joy in doing the thing that I used to love, because it was so stress related now that it was about prestige, it was about pressure, it was about doing things the right way and always being on top of the game, and it was just not a relaxing art anymore that I enjoyed doing and expressing myself. So that was the first sign for me that the thing I loved the most became the center of my stress.
Okay. And then you said that was the first time you caught it too late.
Yeah.
What was and you couldn't shoot for 2 years after you basically stepped over that burnout line.
Yeah, horrible feeling as well. to lose love for the thing that you used to love the most. It's a horrible feeling. Like, to imagine like seeing the camera that once gave you joy and dreams and aspirations and a guidance in life, and then suddenly you're like, I just want to hide it. I don't want to see it. And I don't want to even think about the things I gave up in my career in order to get back my health now, because those were the two things I had on the table at that time to sacrifice. I had to choose between my health and my business. And that was a horrible decision to make because I worked so hard for this thing that I really loved.
So, but what did you do for those 2 years to kind of get back to a point where you were able to start shooting again?
Well, it's going to sound ridiculous, but I went through a phase where the first few weeks, I was literally just in bed. I was going through a very heavy depression, and I didn't want to see the world. I didn't want to meet people. I moved back with my parents. I completely gave up on my business, so I was unemployed for quite some time. And it was very like a difficult period of my life just to learn to prioritize my health and not to care about the prestige or the disappointment of moving back with your parents at 26, 27. Which you feel like I've gone from shooting for like the top magazines and having my business to now suddenly like being unemployed, moving in with my family, and just giving up on everything. That's how you view it in that moment.
Yeah, and I don't think that a lot of people that have been through what you've been through would consider it to be ridiculous, because it fits the story of a lot of people that have stepped over the line and gone into burnout. It fits a lot of stories about that. So I think it's a pretty common pattern for how it for how humans that step over that line kind of behave. But then you moved back to your parents, and at some point you did something that started your recuperation to kind of step back. What kind of steps were you taking at that point?
Well, first of all, I told myself that I promised myself that I'm not going to attach that camera unless I get excited about an idea or I get excited about picking it up. So that immediately took off that pressure. I focused on my physical health. I focused on eating healthy, doing the things that felt good in that moment, maybe talking to my family members, maybe meeting a friend, or just maybe even isolating, which I needed for a long time. I also sought later on, as I figured out that I couldn't really fix it all by myself, I sought mental health professionals. I went to therapy, and that's how I started doing my therapy, and I still do it today. And it taught me a lot about myself, therapy.
Okay.
And the burnout. It taught me where my finish line is. It taught me where, like, I thought I could achieve anything, and that was the tenacious spirit that I always had, and I was born with that. And I thought, like, just because I want to achieve something, I am completely capable of doing it with hard work, whatever that is. And I don't care how many hours I'm going to have to invest in that. But it taught me that maybe your spirit doesn't have a limit, but your body does have a limit.
I mean, yeah, it absolutely does. But you also said that you mentioned that this was the first time.
Yes.
Kind of alluding to the fact that there was a second time.
Exactly. And I thought I learned the lesson the first time. I was like, 2 years break. Like, I'm never going to have to do that again because now I know better. But the second time was actually very recent. It was like about a year ago. And I took less time off. I took a year off. But it sneaked up on me on another way. Like, I wasn't working, I would say, as hard, but it was more of like this constant little work always at the background 24/7. It was kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts rather than big, huge events that were draining me. And I also like spent a lot of hours investing time in networking or putting my resources in other things. And when the stress started showing up, I was in denial. I didn't think that it was going to get that bad. I was like, because I know what this is like. I have done all the mental work. I've done all the pre-planning. Like, I know how to handle a burnout, and it just sneaked up on me, really.
Okay, and how did it present itself the second time? Like, was because you obviously, like, you didn't move back to your parents at that point.
No.
So what were the things that happened at that point when you stepped over the line a second time?
Well, the first signs I would say was irritation. Like, there was a lot of irritation. I was really like struggling with frustrating feelings, a lot of self-criticism. That self-criticism turns into criticism for other things, other people, circumstances. So that's how it started. Then it started with a little bit of brain fog, that I was like, oh, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe if I sleep over the weekend, like, I'm gonna be fine. But that brain fog like accumulated with the passage of time, and it wasn't getting any better. And that was also like a very big flag for me, because I never had brain fog, even at the first burnout. The kind of brain fog, I feel like I still have a little bit left over from that. I feel like that was, I was afraid that something was happening to me beyond the burnout. I thought that something was happening physically, that I needed to get checked for it. Like, okay. It was worrying me a lot, because it's really weird suddenly like getting an email and not being able to understand what you're reading.
Yeah.
I was like, am I having a stroke? Like, is this like a sign? Like, I was just checking on my watch, like my beats. I was like, am I okay? Like, should I get checked out? Because like I don't understand what I'm reading. It was literally like 2 sentences, and I remember I was sitting there for like 30 minutes looking at it, and I was like, how the hell am I not able to understand what I'm reading right now?
But do you think that these are, like with the irritation and the brain fog, do you think that these are common things that people should look out for if they feel like they're pushing towards that edge with the irritation and everything? Like, do you think that those are general indicators, or do you think that these are something that are a little bit more individual to you?
Well, I mean, if you look at like some mental health research or some very basic stress management things, like the first symptoms of stress is usually frustration, irritation, emotional irregularity, and this has to do with your nervous system that has been showered with like cortisol. So if you just take stress and your system is constantly under that filter, it just sees everything as a threat. And it's really hard to just stay calm. If you're struggling to enjoy calm moments, if you're struggling to find joy in things that you used to really enjoy, if suddenly you're getting really like irritated by people, maybe you criticize more than you normally would, maybe people at work are irritating you a lot and you notice that suddenly everybody's irritating you, then yeah, maybe you're working around people that are irritating. But it could be like a thing of you being just exhausted and not being able to have like manage other people's feelings.
Yeah, because you're lacking the normal buffer that you would usually have to kind of buffer out the kind of things about people that kind of sometimes rub you the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly.